Along the sunlit edges of the eastern Pacific, where continents meet cold currents and the ocean breathes against rocky shores, vast underwater forests rise and fall with the rhythm of the tide. These are kelp forests, towering, living structures built not from wood, but from algae, swaying like slow-motion cathedrals beneath the surface. Within this vertical world of light and shadow lives a predator perfectly adapted to complexity, the kelp base. Known scientifically as Paralabrax clathratus, the kelp base is not an apex predator in size, but it is an apex presence in behavior. It does not dominate by brute force alone. It dominates through awareness, positioning, and an intimate understanding of structure. Every stalk of kelp, every crevice in volcanic rock, every shift in current is part of its mental map. Evolution shaped the kelp base for life in 3 dimensions. Its body is streamlined yet muscular, built for sudden acceleration rather than sustained speed. The coloration is subtle but effective, a mottled pattern of olive, bronze, and dark speckling that dissolves its outline against kelp fronds and reef shadows. This camouflage is not passive. It is an active tool, allowing the fish to vanish until the precise moment of attack. The eyes of the kelp base are forward-facing compared to many reef fish, granting enhanced depth perception. In the filtered light of kelp forests, where visibility shifts by the second, this visual precision is critical. Prey rarely sees the kelp base coming. Often, it never sees it at all. The habitat of the kelp base stretches along the Pacific coast of North America, from central California down through Baja California. It favors near-shore environments where structure is abundant, kelp forests, rocky reefs, jetties, and even man-made structures like piers and breakwaters. What matters is not geography, but complexity. Flat, featureless seafloor offers little value to a predator that relies on ambush and spatial advantage. Kelp forests themselves are among the most productive ecosystems on Earth, rivaling tropical rainforests in biomass. They create vertical corridors filled with invertebrates, small fish, and constant motion. For the kelp base, this is both hunting ground and refuge. Juveniles remain deeper within the kelp canopy, where dense cover offers protection from larger predators. Adults patrol the edges, where forest meets open water and opportunity concentrates. Diet defines behavior, and the kelp base is a disciplined generalist. Its menu includes smaller fish, crabs, shrimp, squid, and various benthic invertebrates. It is not a reckless hunter. Energy efficiency governs every decision. A chase that burns more calories than it returns is abandoned instantly. Instead, the kelp base positions itself at choke points, gaps in kelp, reef edges, shadow lines, where prey movement becomes predictable. Feeding often peaks during dawn and dusk, when light conditions favor the predator. In these moments, the kelp forest transforms. Shadows lengthen, silhouettes blur, and the kelp base becomes a ghost with intent. A sudden burst, a flash of muscle, and the hunt is over in less than a second. Social behavior in kelp base is fluid rather than fixed. Juveniles may form loose aggregations, benefiting from safety in numbers. Adults, however, tend toward territoriality, especially during breeding seasons. Territories are not rigidly defended through constant aggression, but through presence. A dominant individual occupies prime structure and displaces competitors simply by being there, larger, calmer, unchallenged. Reproduction introduces another layer of complexity. As temperatures rise in late spring and summer, kelp base gather in spawning aggregations. These events are synchronized with environmental cues, water temperature, lunar cycles, current patterns. Females release eggs into the water column, where fertilization occurs externally. The eggs drift, becoming part of the planktonic world before settling back into the forest as larvae. This dispersal phase is both risk and opportunity. Mortality is high, but genetic exchange across wide areas strengthens the population as a whole. Survivors return not as copies of their parents, but as refined iterations, shaped by currents, predators, and chance. The kelp base occupies a critical role in maintaining balance within kelp forest ecosystems. By controlling populations of smaller fish and invertebrates, it prevents overgrazing of kelp and unchecked population explosions. Remove the kelp base, and the forest begins to unravel in subtle but cascading ways. Yet despite its adaptability, the kelp base is not immune to pressure. Overfishing, habitat degradation, and warming oceans alter the delicate structure it depends on. Kelp forests themselves are sensitive to temperature changes and storm intensity. When the forest weakens, so does everything that relies on it. Still, the kelp base persists. It patrols, it adapts, it waits. In the layered silence beneath the waves, among the slow-motion towers of kelp, the kelp base remains what it has always been, a patient ruler of a world built on movement, light, and shadow. To understand the kelp base fully, one must stop thinking of the ocean as open space and begin seeing it as architecture. In kelp forests, space is vertical, layered, and alive. Light filters down in broken shafts, currents twist unpredictably, and every meter holds both danger and opportunity. The kelp base is not merely a resident of this environment, it is a reader of it. Every movement it makes is informed by an awareness of structure. Unlike pelagic predators that rely on endless motion, the kelp base is a strategist. It spends long periods suspended nearly motionless in the water column, using subtle fin adjustments to maintain position. This stillness is deceptive. Beneath it lies constant calculation. The base tracks shifting shadows, the rhythm of kelp fronds, the micro-movements of prey disturbed by currents. It knows when to wait and when to explode into motion. This burst-style predation is one of its defining traits. The musculature of the kelp base is optimized for acceleration rather than endurance. When prey enters striking distance, the base lunges with explosive speed, jaws flaring open in a fraction of a second. The attack is over almost as soon as it begins. Success depends not on pursuit, but on timing so precise that escape becomes statistically irrelevant. Behaviorally, kelp base display a form of environmental intelligence often underestimated in fish. Individuals learn the contours of their territory over time. They recognize productive hunting zones, seasonal changes in prey abundance, and even human activity patterns. Around piers and harbors, kelp base quickly associate structure with food availability, adjusting their routines accordingly. This adaptability explains why they thrive not only in pristine kelp forests, but also in altered coastal environments. Territorial behavior emerges most strongly among mature adults. Prime sections of reef or kelp edge are occupied by dominant individuals that subtly exclude rivals. Aggression is usually minimal. Displays, positioning, and size advantage resolve most conflicts before they escalate. Energy conservation remains paramount. Only when boundaries are seriously challenged does physical confrontation occur, and even then, it is brief and decisive. Juvenile kelp base live very different lives. Smaller and more vulnerable, they remain deep within the kelp canopy or among rocky crevices, feeding on tiny invertebrates and avoiding open water entirely. Growth is steady but cautious. Each centimeter gained reduces vulnerability and expands possibility. Survival to adulthood is not guaranteed, it is earned through invisibility and restraint. Seasonality influences every aspect of kelp-based behavior. Water temperature shifts affect metabolism, feeding intensity, and reproductive readiness. During warmer months, activity levels rise, territories become more clearly defined, and spawning aggregations form. These gatherings are not chaotic. They are structured events shaped by environmental cues older than memory. Currents must be right, temperatures must stabilize, timing must align. Spawning itself is a moment of calculated risk. By releasing eggs into open water, kelp base trade certainty for dispersal. Predation rates are high, but survivors gain access to new habitats and genetic mixing. This strategy has allowed the species to maintain resilience across a wide geographic range, even as local conditions fluctuate. The sensory world of the kelp base is finely tuned. Vision dominates, but it is supported by a sensitive lateral line system capable of detecting minute vibrations in the water. This allows the base to perceive prey even when visibility drops due to turbidity or low light. In the constantly shifting kelp forest, redundancy in perception is a survival advantage. Ecologically, the kelp base occupies a stabilizing role. It prevents any single prey species from becoming dominant, maintaining balance within the food web. This regulation indirectly supports kelp health itself, as unchecked herbivores can devastate kelp stands. In this way, the kelp base acts as an unseen gardener, shaping the forest by controlling those who would consume it too aggressively. Human interaction adds complexity to this dynamic. Recreational fishing targets kelp base heavily, especially in accessible near-shore zones. Management measures such as size limits and seasonal closures exist to protect breeding populations, but enforcement and compliance vary. Where regulations are respected, populations remain robust. Where pressure exceeds recovery, local declines follow. Despite these pressures, the kelp base continues to demonstrate resilience. Its flexibility, intelligence, and deep integration with structured habitats give it tools many species lack. As long as kelp forests stand, the kelp base will find ways to rule within them. But the forest itself is changing. The future of the kelp base is inseparable from the future of the forests it inhabits. Kelp forests are not static landscapes, they are dynamic systems balanced on narrow environmental thresholds. Temperature, nutrient availability, storm frequency, and grazing pressure all determine whether a forest thrives or collapses. In recent decades, these thresholds have been pushed harder than at any point in modern history. Marine heatwaves have become more frequent along the Pacific coast, disrupting the cold, nutrient-rich waters that kelp requires to grow. When water temperatures remain elevated for extended periods, kelp growth slows or fails entirely. Without dense kelp canopies, the three-dimensional structure that defines the kelp bass world begins to flatten. Shelter disappears, hunting corridors dissolve, juvenile refuge zones vanish. At the same time, shifts in predator-prey dynamics further destabilize the system. The decline of sea stars due to disease outbreaks has allowed sea urchin populations to expand unchecked in some regions. These urchins graze relentlessly on kelp holdfasts, transforming lush forests into barren seascapes known as urchin barrens. In these simplified environments, the kelp base loses its greatest advantage, structure. The base can adapt to many things, but it cannot adapt to emptiness. Human activity compounds these changes. Coastal development increases sedimentation, reducing water clarity and interfering with photosynthesis. Agricultural runoff alters nutrient balances, sometimes fueling algal blooms that compete with kelp. Noise pollution, boat traffic, and physical disturbance reshape nearshore behavior patterns, subtly pushing fish away from optimal habitats. Fishing pressure remains one of the most direct human influences on kelp-based populations. While the species is not currently considered endangered, localized overfishing can remove the largest, most reproductively valuable individuals from the population. These older bass are not just bigger, they are more experienced spawners, producing higher quality eggs and contributing disproportionately to population stability. Their loss weakens resilience from within, yet the story is not purely one of decline. In areas where marine protected zones have been established, kelp forests show remarkable capacity for recovery. Within these refuges, kelp bass grow larger, live longer, and reassert their ecological roles. Spillover effects benefit surrounding fisheries, demonstrating that conservation and sustainable use are not opposing forces, but complementary strategies. The kelp base also benefits from its inherent adaptability. It can utilize artificial structures when natural reefs degrade. It can shift diet composition in response to prey availability. It can alter daily activity patterns to avoid human disturbance. These traits offer a buffer against change, buying time in a rapidly shifting ocean. But adaptability has limits. Without healthy kelp forests, the identity of the kelp base itself begins to erode. It becomes a predator without a stage, a strategist without structure. The loss would not be immediate or dramatic. It would be gradual, quiet, and easy to overlook until absence becomes normal. From a broader perspective, the kelp base is more than a single species. It is a representative of coastal resilience, a symbol of how life organizes itself around complexity. Where the environment offers layers, shadows, and choices, species evolve intelligence, patience, and balance. When that complexity is stripped away, life simplifies, and often disappears. The fate of the kelp base challenges a fundamental assumption of human progress, that ecosystems will adapt indefinitely to our influence. Some will, others will not. Kelp forests sit on the edge of that divide, and the kelp base stands within him as both beneficiary and warning. In the filtered light beneath the waves, where kelp fronds still rise toward the surface and currents still carry the memory of colder seas, the kelp base continues its patrol. It waits at the boundary between forest and open water, between past stability and an uncertain future. Its survival depends not on dominance, but on the preservation of the world that taught it how to hunt, how to wait, and how to rule without noise. The story of the kelp base is not finished. It is being written now, in warming currents, in protected coves, in human decisions made far from the water's edge. Whether this predator continues to rule the forests of the sea will depend on whether those forests are allowed to stand.